Okay, we're going to start with a poll, see who's all represented here today. So take a minute and fill in this poll.
And from our side, we always think of this like a race. It's really fun for us.
Yeah.
So private sponsors are winning with service provider. They're equal. There's still a few people who haven't voted yet. Let's see.
Have to have the fundamentals in place.
And yeah, so the majority of people in this room are private sponsors. And then after following that is service providers, then community advocates. Of course, you can also belong to multiple roles.
Yeah. And I think, Osama, you're a sponsored individual too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we're going to
pass it off to Laureen to explain a little bit more about the Allies Refugee Integration Project.
All right, hi guys. So I see a lot of familiar faces. This is our third session, so I think I'm gonna skip the PowerPoint today, since most of you know the job of ISCA and them as a pilot. So just very quickly, my name is Laureen. I'm with Allies for Refugee Integration at Refugee 613. My other project coordinator, Michelle, wasn't able to make it today. Who's from Okasi in Toronto. But Allies for Refugee Integration is a 3-year project, and we're working to understand and improve the collaboration between private sponsors, settlement workers, and newcomers, and looking at what are the challenges, what are the benefits, how is everybody working together to service better integration. And we're in the 3rd year of the project, looking to pilot new and innovative ways to improve this collaboration. And one of our pilots is, of course, the lovely ISCA and Steve and Uger. And they're testing knowledge dissemination and how to bring out information. And so we're doing these series of events. Of course, originally it was going to be in person and would have met you all outside of my living room, but with 2020, of course, we're all doing this online. So it's nice to see you though on the film, my computer screen. But yeah, so ARI has been testing out these pilots with ISCA, and then also 2 case management pilots that are in Kitchener-Waterloo and in Toronto. And we'll have a new pilot coming up in Windsor also doing case management. So looking at 3-way case management and pre and post arrival meetings and what does that look like. But just for your information, we're funded by the SDI branch and IRCC. And if you want more information, just contact me, and I look forward to listening to everything about housing. I've been struggling with it in Ottawa, so I'm curious as to what the Kingston context is and from hearing it from all the panelists. So thank you so much, guys.
Great, thanks, Laureen. So I want to introduce our panelists today, or our special guests. We've got John Dunn with Kingston Community Legal Clinic. He's the executive director there. Hi, John, thank you. And we're going to cover a lot of topics today. So we've got also John Henderson and Nicola Reed from the City of Kingston Housing Department. Thank you. And we have Osama, who shows up as Nawar on the screen. And Osama is a recipient of a Habitat for Humanity home. Am I correct?
Yes.
It's in process anyways, right?
Yeah, the house will be done in December, next December.
Okay, so we're working on that. So there's lots of things to talk about. So it's all about, the conversation today is to share, oh yes, Tarek Al-Maghrabi also as representing sponsors. Tarek, thank you for joining us. Yeah, so yeah, a wide representation. So we're excited today because we're gonna have this conversation about the Kingston community and what kind of issues we're facing, but also what kind of opportunities we have and how we can help the people that we're serving, the refugees who are new to Kingston, and how we can work together. So settlement workers and sponsors and the newcomers and everybody is working together to make this a more welcoming place for newcomers. Yeah. So thank you for joining. So we're going to start with some questions, and I think we're going to start with Tarek El-Maghrabi, and just want to ask you as a sponsor or representing sponsors, how do you support newcomers in finding housing? What is it you're doing out there? Any best practices, things that you've learned? Just kind of give us a little bit of a lay of the land.
Thanks, Steve, for giving me this chance to speak. I'm glad to meet all of you. Nice to see all of you. Hopefully, I was going to meet you in person someday. Thanks, Laureen and the ARI team for doing this project. It's really nice. In fact, when it comes to housing, it's a very challenging thing for the newcomers. My voice is clear for everyone first?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Good, yeah. So housing is always a challenge for newcomers. I would say at all levels, whether they are immigrants, whether they are government assisted or even privately sponsored refugees, for multiple reasons. And we learned over the years somehow some lessons. Some of them are positive, some of them are also unfortunately, I would say, challenging, which we cannot overcome. One of the things that I think we learned before the privately sponsored families can come, if you can secure a house, that would be the best thing. A house or an apartment, I mean a permanent accommodation, that would be a good thing. There is some also, another lesson learned is that giving the newcomers before they come a hint about the rules in Canada, that when they get a place, or if we are going to rent a place for them, that they will be stuck in that place for 1 year. That can be sometimes a big challenge because not everyone is going to understand that situation. They think that they can come and in a month or two, maybe they will find another place. Sometimes even they want to move out of the city. They find that Kingston is not the place where they can stay for a whole year. Because of the job opportunities, because of relatives, because of news they hear, a positive news about finding life easier in areas like Toronto or Ottawa or other places. So that's one thing which I find very important to clarify for the families before signing any paper on their behalf before their arrival about the commitment of the 1 year. Try as much as you can sending them clear pictures and video, and maybe try to make a video chat with them before they come to show them the layout of the apartment, the layout of the areas around the place, and all these things. Usually the newcomers, before they come, they are very grateful for what you are doing for them, and whatever you say, they say, oh, that's nice, thank you so much, and all these things. But when they are on the ground here after a month or two, things can change, challenges can be there. And that's why as much as you can, as a sponsor, to be transparent and show everything is one lesson, which is very important. The other lesson which we saw is that 100% the location of the place to be close to a bus station or a central zone of multiple buses is very important. That's one thing as well. Now, the housing in Canada is also a challenge regarding the income because all families, when they arrive here as privately sponsored or other sponsored from the government, they have a limited budget and they will never imagine that the housing will eat up above 60 to 70% of their income, even sometimes more than that. And that's a kind of an equation needs to be well conveyed to the families before they arrive or at the time of their arrival. Now, another challenge also we found is that the relation of the families with the landlord and the neighbors, because you know, cultures are different and the rules are different from all over the world compared to Canada here. So in at the same time I'm working at Keys, so we have what's called a kind of a dedicated orientation session which we give to the government assisted refugees when they arrive here. It's almost like 3 or 4 hours, speaking only about housing and all the challenges. That chance for the privately sponsored is not there by a structure of giving a presentation and all these things. It's there, but more on a casual and informal way about the housing system in Canada. But these challenges of the law and the rules and how to deal with your neighbors, about cutting grass, for example, also because we face that thing also because taking care of the front yard or the backyard is not something, especially the front yard, is not an optional thing that you do it the way you like. It's something like you have to be going with the bylaws of the city. So those are all important things. One challenge situation we faced, I just wanted to share with you that looking for an affordable accommodation, we ended up renting some kind of studios or small apartments of 1 bedroom or something like that with one property manager here in Kingston, or not manager, but a landlord. And then it ended up that he was a terrible landlord and things were very bad for those 4 persons who were living with that landlord. So we escalated the thing and complained to the city of Kingston. And there's something called the property standards committee or officers or something like that they are by theoretically supposed to come and help the tenants and to rectify all these things. So our personal experience with this challenge was very negative. In fact, it's all paperwork, very lengthy process. There is no real action to be taken against the landlord. It's all like kind of, I would say, rough language emails only, but nothing specifically could, at least in our case, we spent around I would say 8 months trying to get the landlord fix the things for the tenants, but we just failed to get that thing. I mean, the other thing also I would like to put as a challenge for people, that there are some, large organizations or large agents in the city here, like Homestead and others, who are renting for people. I think we have a very positive experience with Homestead as an affordable accommodation, and they are very good in accepting the guarantor and all these things. While others like Frontenac, I'm just saying names, it's a whole public specific thing, I'm not against anybody. But for example, Frontenac property, they will not even let you do the viewing when they understand that this is the kind of family who will be the first time to be in Canada with no credit history and all these things. So there's kind of a level of discrimination when it comes to some large property management organizations in Kingston here. Also the other thing we saw with our families that, when you go to Kijiji, you find maybe 15 listings, and then people will pick up, oh, this is a nice one, 3 bedroom, 1,400, can I view that thing? And then when we try to book viewing, again, there is another level of discrimination. I don't want to say discrimination, but a kind of a level of ignoring the request to give you a viewing. So sometimes the family will feel a little bit confused why there are I'm asking 4 out of these 15 listings to view and nobody accepted the viewing even. It's not really still, we are not going to sign contracts. It's only, I just need to see the place and all the things. So viewing even is a challenge when the landlords, I'm speaking about now individual landlords, knew about the condition of the family who's going to live in that house. I think those are most of the things, but let me check on the notes which I was writing here. One of the things also, when a privately sponsored family rented a house or something, and then something happened in the family with change in the dynamics of the family, like a separation of the family or something, that's another level of challenge, because now changing the contract to one of the parents or the other person will be a kind of paperwork and all these things, and then they are not aware that they have to do this paperwork, so they will go to the sponsors, and if the sponsors are not on the spot and doing these things, that it can also end up by having challenge with the landlord or the property manager for that for these families. I mean, I find also one of the challenges is finding an affordable places for single individuals coming to the country here. The allowance is usually around maybe $700 to $1,000 per month, and finding a decent room will not be less than 600. I'm speaking about a room, not an apartment.
Mhm.
So, and then also finding a room, we were hoping that language barrier is an issue, because people can speak only. Steve, just stop me when you feel I'm exceeding the time, so I can just continue.
Yeah, well, we can, like you brought up some issues already. I'm wondering if there's others that would like to comment on some of these issues, maybe some ways, practical ways you've overcome some of these issues, or so that we can kind of grow and learn together. Is there anybody that'd like to jump in there? That would be a good thing maybe to do at this point.
One point, just before I forgot it,
Yeah.
that the 60-day notice is something that also not many of the clients are aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we ignore that point, and then they come and say, okay, I'm almost there, and they found another place. I want to move the beginning of December, which is after 15 days. They don't know about these 60 days, and they got very upset when they understand that point. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So I think a lot of these things are probably explained to them, but sometimes they have to learn them by experience, I guess, too, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always the best teacher, I guess, sometimes. What about Tarek? What about references? How do I have a question around that? Like, do the landlords ask for references, and how do you handle that for people that are brand new?
Credit checks.
Yeah, and credit checks.
Yeah, they do ask for references for sure, and they do also ask for a guarantor,
Mm-hmm.
because those families that usually are not they don't have any credit history in the country here.
Mm-hmm.
In our group, for the privately sponsored, usually one of the sponsors would be a guarantor, and we find no issue with that. We find no issue with that, especially for the people like Homestead. When it comes to private landlords or individual landlords, if they are a friend of one of the sponsors, or a relative or someone they know, the person in person from the sponsor group, then that's okay. But if not, then there should be kind of challenge.
Yeah, I feel like for finding housing, using your networks, like the sponsorship groups or settlement workers, people have networks of friends and on their Facebook page or whatever, that's a good way to kind of secure some housing. Does anyone else want to jump in and make some comments here?
I can echo the positivity of Homestead on quite a number of occasions. It's been very, very positive. At one point, we had a place all furnished, and there was a delay in the family arriving. And at that time, they were giving 3 months equivalent free rent. That was early on. Not sure. I don't think they're doing that now. And we got out of the house without notice, and actually, after having it for at least 2 months, going into the third, there was really no cost to us, very little cost in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the family did arrive, we were able to get another place, but very, very good. Now, the other place that I've had experience with is Brayberry, only on one situation, but again, it worked out quite smoothly. Brayberry Homes.
That's good. Thanks for that. Also, you can use the chat feature to share information, or you want to share any good networking, opportunities that people might want. Well, you can share that chat feature too. That would be helpful.
Steve, can I just say something? This is Mimi here.
Hi.
For those who don't know me, I'm with the Anglican Diocese, and we're a sponsorship agreement holder. Just to say one thing about securing housing, it is easier to try to find that housing before the refugee arrives, but it's actually strongly encouraged to wait until they're actually in the country, because the goal of the sponsorship program is to help people foster independence. So if you can do that process with them and find them temporary housing first, that's usually what we are told by RSCC to tell people, is find temporary housing first, and then do that process with the refugee of finding an apartment, and that way they get more independence in choosing where they want to live, and what type of place what it looks like and things like that, and going through that process with them. I know it's not always easy, but that's what's strongly encouraged for newcomers to Canada. And the other thing too is, when a newcomer needs a guarantor, if you go through a sponsorship agreement holder, and usually your sponsorship agreement holder should be able to provide you with a letter or a reference letter saying that, we know this refugee, we know they're newcomer to Canada, that you can take to a landlord or things like that. So depending on who you're working with, they can provide you with that letter as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe Osama, do you have anything to add to that from your experience?
My experience is just 60 days notice.
Yeah.
I have this experience because my house that I got from Habitat will be done by December. But I can't move it before because they didn't give me an exact day when is the moving day. So I have to wait a date for moving, and I have to give homestead 60 days notice. So the moving will be delayed 2 months.
Yeah.
That's an issue for me.
Yeah.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. I hear you.
So this
I want to ask a question to John. Following Tarek's information that was given to us, do you have any instruction that you could give us if landlords refuse to, to rent to refugees or any other newcomers? We also have had this experience of, as soon as they hear newcomers or refugees, they don't even want to talk to us. So if you have any advice for us, I would really appreciate it.
So yes, I do. So when it's my turn to speak, I had intended to include a portion about human rights. I'm just going to talk about human rights right now.
Yeah, that's great.
Because that indeed is much of what Tarek spoke about. And some of what I'm going to talk about, many of you know. So this is largely directed towards people who aren't familiar with the Human Rights Code. But of course, in Ontario, the Human Rights Code is what we call quasi-constitutional. To the extent of any conflict between the Human Rights Code and any other law, the Human Rights Code prevails. And there's a special section in the Human Rights Code about rental accommodation, and it says this. It says that everyone is entitled to equal treatment without discrimination because of a whole host of grounds. Now, normally at the legal clinic, the ground is usually disability, but I'm on a call where we're talking about refugees. And there are a whole series of grounds that relate to the condition of being a refugee. For example, one's place of origin. And of course, many of these landlords or other service providers would say, I don't intend to discriminate against anyone. But what is important, principle one of human rights law is that intention is unimportant. We don't care about your intention. We only care about result. So when Tarek talks about, for example, the demand for reference checks, then I say, well, does a reference check affect somebody who moved from Somalia a year ago differently than it might affect someone who was born in Kingston? Well, of course it does. And so the law has conceptualized something called constructive discrimination or adverse impact discrimination. It's the same thing. It means that there's a rule that seems neutral. We ask everybody for a credit check. We ask everybody for a reference. But where it has a particularly negative effect on a particular population, that may be discrimination. And so what do tenants do, and what do people who help tenants do when you learn about those sorts of things? When the landlord won't return the call because one of you has identified that you're here helping a newcomer. Well, I'll give you the short answer. You should call me or email me very quickly, okay? And please just try to maintain specifics. Names, dates, places, that's what lawyers like. Emails are even better because that's how I communicate. And when people are treated with discrimination, we'll act on that. And much of the time that materializes as an application to the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario. And we can make those applications very quickly. So the very last remark about human rights I'd like to make is just about the concept of accommodation, that housing providers are expected to accommodate people's differences up to the point of undue hardship. And often they don't need to do that, or they don't do that. And so if one of you folks encounters this and you contact me, often what I will do is I will make a request for accommodation. And that's a bit of a hot potato to somebody who doesn't want to deal with it, because once there's a request for accommodation, if they don't reasonably accommodate, they can be liable for damages, and we'll go after them. And maybe those are, I will also say very finally that when we look at who discriminates, so there were two good landlords who were mentioned, and indeed that's our experience as well. Homestead, there was a reference to Caraco. They're as landlords, they're called CJM property management, and they're really fine people. But I was particularly disturbed by the observation about Frontenac property management. By now, I've already checked my emails to see how many I've got, and no, the last one is 2017. But when people have that experience, I hope you'll call me. And I'm going to stop talking.
Well, thanks, John. Well, that's good. And if, like, maybe we could direct some questions at John from others. Yeah. To John Dunn. Any questions for John?
It's not really a question, but a bit of a comment. I'm not sure if the experience in Kingston is the same. So you can correct me or maybe put it into context, some of you who are in Kingston. But what we're experiencing here in Ottawa, and what I'm curious if John can help with, is with the rent caps that are happening for next year due to legal changes with COVID-19 and some of the legislation putting a cap on rent. What a lot of the housing associations that serve newcomers are really worried about, and what they've already started to experience, is that the increase of no-fault evictions to newcomers. So what this means is they're getting eviction notices that are no fault, so they're not penalized, but it's because the landlord, through some sneaky measures, has realized that they can't increase the rent to the same tenant. And so what they will do is give them a no-fault eviction so that they can then put the apartment or the house back on the market at a higher price. And so, you know, their costs are still going up even though there's a rent cap. And so they're trying to find ways to still put the price back on the market at higher. And so they're advising all sponsors and newcomers to really be on the watch for this kind of thing, and then to reach out to the legal clinics that are in Ottawa when they see this. So I'm just wondering if in Kingston there's the same sort of housing crisis or anticipation of this happening in early 2021.
I'd like to, it's a brilliant question, a great observation. I'd like to just use this as a segue into what I was going to say about evictions, because at Kingston Community Legal Clinic, our business, when in terms of residential tenancies, is about 80% just helping people with evictions. I can talk about disrepair, which was referred to earlier, but I'd really like to just talk about evictions. And I'd like to maybe expand things beyond what Lorene has said to this. That evictions are like school. Success is just showing up and being engaged. And so when any of you learn about landlords serving people with eviction notices, it's critical to take that to the legal clinic ASAP. And same thing applies in Ottawa and anywhere else as well as Kingston. But in Kingston, we defend everyone who is served with an eviction notice. If people are served with one of these no-fault eviction notices, what we call landlord's own use, purchaser's own use, we assume that they're fraudulent. That's our starting point. Of course, that isn't always correct, but the onus is on the landlord to prove. And one of the challenges, if I could be permitted one particular stereotype about immigrants, is that for people who don't grow up in Canada, often people don't have faith in the justice system. But even with all of the dreadful things that I could say about the landlord and tenant board, there are fail-safes and it can work. And for people who are represented by a lawyer at a legal clinic, it works almost always. That maybe is a good place to stop just talking about eviction. Really, all you have to remember is if you see an eviction notice or there's a letter or a text, just bring it to our attention and we'll act quite fast.
Thanks, John. So, John, could you just maybe clarify how would one of us reach out to you to get help? Is there a cost involved, or just clarify that process for us?
So, maybe I'll get into trouble for what I'm about to say. Is there a cost involved? No. Okay. Why might I be in trouble? Because we do have financial eligibility guidelines. Those are set by Legal Aid Ontario. And I'm looking at Gayatri. She's on our board of directors. So I have some accountability here. However, here's what I will say. That since the pandemic began, all of the hearings have moved online, and the hearings are of a different nature and quality than they were before. So as I speak to you, my colleagues are online too, dealing with hearings. Right now, I'm not in a hearing because I'm speaking with you. And so when people even are over, we can ask the board for discretion to represent them. And often we do, because there are patterns that we recognize, because in these pandemic times, we're just doing evictions and evictions and more evictions. So how do you engage the clinic? Well, it's fairly simple. One, just phone our front desk. We have 2 people at the front desk right now, 613-541-0777. It's on the website, of course. And the best thing is that if there's paper involved, like somebody being served with a notice of termination, if you can scan it and email it to me, it's fabulous. If you don't have a scanner, you don't have a computer, and you just got a phone, we can still get these, okay? But that's what moves things very fast. Once we have the paper on our hard drive, that's 80 or 90% of it. Most of the work that we could we could actually do without even speaking to the tenant, because when we get a notice of termination or an application to the landlord and tenant board, we go through a checklist to find out what's wrong with it. Every single business day, we are sending to the landlord and tenant board what we call motions to dismiss. We look at the paper, it's not good enough. We make an argument, we send it into the landlord and tenant board. That's how we keep people from being evicted. And there, sorry, I was probably a little bit long.
That's great. That's helpful. Thanks. Anyone else? Any questions for John while we still have him?
Just to comment and ask John also. Now, speaking about, because I mentioned the name Frontenac Property Management. So now if we go to their website and we find an apartment or a house which is suitable for one of our families, and then we request a viewing and then they don't answer back or they don't think, would that give us a ground to email you for that? Like feeling that because of discriminatory purposes or something?
Well,
more than that.
Let me concede. Ultimately, you'd need more than that.
Mm-hmm.
In my view, where you start to see a pattern, I would suggest you call people on that and you use people's names. Where if you say, look, my colleague asked for a viewing, and my colleague did this on behalf of a tenant whose name is Jim. I asked for the same viewing, and the tenant's name is Muhammad. Well, Jim got a viewing and Muhammad didn't. I respectfully suggest you've got some explaining to do.
Okay.
And if they don't respond or the response isn't adequate, I think that would be a good approach. And, or similarly, if you could say the last 3 times that I made a request, I didn't get a viewing, and you're a gatekeeper. And if you know that besides being a physician, I help refugee claimants, and a lot of them have names like Ahmed or Omar, and I'm not getting a response, I'm going to go to Dunn. And what does a lawyer do? A lawyer, we can ask for all kinds of information about their statistics. How many people get showing? What are their screening rules? We can demand that information from the landlord. And in the final analysis, they're going to have to provide it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thanks. All right, any questions for John? We want to move on to our friends from the city of Kingston. But one last question for John. Okay, so we've got Nicola Reed and John. Is John still there? John? Yes, there you are. Hi. So we wanted to bring you guys in to help us understand what are some programs or supports that sponsored individuals can apply for. I know a lot of them will need help on the 13th month. But I think there's things that they can do even before then. So could you guys outline some of that for us?
Sure. Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody, for having us. There's a number of programs at the city that are offered and that we work with housing providers in the community to provide housing for low-income households. I've shared a few resources in the chat feature that you might find useful. Home-based Housing has an apartment listing, so they scour Kijiji, and which tends to be the popular site for posting apartments these days. And they put together a resource. I think it's on a weekly basis. So that's the first link I shared. And those tend to be, I said, relatively affordable. So they're not putting up luxury units, but for some people, the rents there still are going to be eating up, like was mentioned earlier, 50, 60, 70% of a household's income on a monthly basis. But that's probably your most comprehensive resource for more relatively affordable apartment listings in Kingston. Another one that was shared there is the affordable housing listing. So these are projects that received capital funding from the city to help build the project in the beginning, and then in exchange, the owner of the building offers units at below market rates for 20 or 30 years, depending on the length of the agreement. So for those, the city doesn't actually manage the wait list. You need to contact the landlords directly, and the contact information is provided there. Nicola's going to speak about, of course, the social housing program, which has a wait list that's managed internally here by the city. But before we get there, maybe just a few, to pick up on a few comments from earlier. Kingston has had a housing challenge for a number of years. The vacancy rate in Kingston was one of the lowest in the country in 2018, and it bumped up a bit in 2019. But housing supply challenges are nothing that we're not familiar with. And of course, what comes along with low vacancy rates and housing supply challenges is higher rents. So rents in Kingston are relatively higher compared to communities of our size. So if you compare rents to rents across the country, our rents are up there with some of the bigger cities. So that's a challenge for newcomers right from the get-go. The other thing I wanted to mention is that for newcomers, and it was mentioned earlier, that networking, so not only for employment, but also for housing, networking is a big thing. A lot of people find it through their networks on Facebook or friends and family that know someone who has a basement apartment or these sorts of things. So working your networks for your service providers that are out there, that's certainly important. But it's not easy. I mean, people that have lived in Kingston community their whole lives, or maybe were raised in Kingston, are now having challenges finding housing. So for a newcomer, of course, they've got wonderful folks such as yourselves working on their behalf, but it's not easy. So a few resources have been shared there, the listings. The program that I'd like to speak about specifically, though, that could be helpful for some newcomers is the home ownership program. So this is a program that the city delivers funding. The funding is actually local municipal dollars, so from the tax base, but there's also provincial funding as well. So with the provincial funding for the home ownership program, the boundaries for the program expand to include the County of Frontenac as well. So people who are interested in rural living, or perhaps sometimes there's more affordable home ownership housing in the rural areas. So when I'm talking about home ownership, it's City of Kingston and County of Frontenac, which is quite large geographically. So the home ownership program, it's a forgivable loan, provides down payment assistance to renter households, and it's there's a long list of eligibility criteria, but newcomers are eligible. So you don't have to be in Canada for a certain period of time. You can be a newcomer. The one criteria, though, that is important, and we do ensure all our criteria are met, because there is obviously a lot of demand for a limited amount of funding, but you must be leaving an existing self-contained rental unit. So the idea of the program from the province and the guideline is that with the down payment assistance, you're helping one household to move into home ownership and benefit from all the benefits that go along with that. But you're also opening up a rental unit for a new household. So when we provide funding to a single household to purchase a house, we're actually helping two, because that opens up a unit for someone else to move into. So if you have clients that are living in a home with another family, maybe they're in the basement, maybe they're occupying a couple bedrooms in the house, that could be a challenge for eligibility criteria. But from what I'm hearing, though, most of the refugee clients sound like they're in apartments. They've signed a lease, which is great, because one of our criteria is to see a lease so that you can meet that criteria of opening up an apartment unit. So that's kind of one of the ones I want to mention up front in terms of the criteria. Household income limit is $85,000 this year for the program. So I'm sure for a lot of your newcomers that wouldn't be an issue depending on the income situation. There's an asset limit, which is $20,000. So we look at your bank records to see what kind of assets you have. If you have over $20,000 in the bank, the theory is that you probably have enough equity available to you to put your own down payment on the house. Currently, the maximum affordable home price, so the price that we're saying is an affordable house, is $325,000. The real estate market in Kingston has increased about 15%, I think they're saying, over the past year. So prices are getting up there, but we've had about a dozen households this year purchase a home under that 325,000 mark. So it is doable, but it's certainly a limiting criteria. But like I said, it does work out. We do generally manage to expend all our funds each year, so it is possible. So the program provides a down payment. The maximum amount of the down payment is 10% of the purchase price. So if someone was to buy a home at that $325,000 mark, they'd get $32,500 down payment. So that would be a contribution from the city to the purchase of the home. The funding's registered as a second mortgage against the property. And the conditions in that agreement are generally that the household has to continue living at that address and have it as their principal residence for 20 years. And after 20 years, the loan's forgiven in full. And during the term of that loan, there's no principal or interest payments. So it's essentially free money. And if after 20 years you still live there, it's forgiven. We've been doing this program since 2007. And about 50% of the purchasers have sold. So you've probably heard people move on average, every 5 to 7 years. So over the years, I guess 13 years since we started the program, we've done about 150 or so purchases, and about half of those have sold. So when you sell, you pay back the amount that the city lent you, as well as 10% of the capital appreciation. So if the property went up in value by $100,000, let's say, and you sell, then you'd pay the city the original loan plus the capital appreciation of $10,000. And that money, of course, goes back in. It's a revolving fund, goes back in to help fund other households that are looking to purchase. Mm-hmm. So in my experience, I've been doing the program for about 4 years now, and we've had, I believe, one household that was a newcomer. I think they'd been in Canada for maybe a year and a half or so, but it worked out for them. They had their employment lined up, and they were able to meet the financial requirements to service a mortgage. The big, and I'm just about to finish up here, the big criteria for us, or the big possible limiting factor for your clients, is going to be securing lender financing from a primary lending institution. So with an application, you have to provide proof that somebody's going to lend you money for the balance of the purchase price. And that's obviously the biggest challenge, because when the bank is looking at you, they're looking at credit histories, they're looking at income and those sorts of things. So they will provide a pre-approval for a certain amount based on your ability to service debt when you purchase a home. So we really hang our hat on the bank to do the financial review. We don't look at, we don't do calculations in terms of, okay, what amount of mortgage are they going to meet? What are their monthly costs? Will they be able to make these payments? We put that on the bank. So they have the expertise, of course, to review these sorts of things. And if you can get pre-approval from a bank and meet all the other criteria, then you're good to go. So for clients that might be interested in the home ownership program, meeting with lending institutions is probably something they might want to do early on before they start looking for homes. Mm-hmm. Looking on realtor.ca is really exciting, but you don't want to get someone's hopes up only to find out that getting a loan is going to be a challenge. So I think that's everything I want to say. The program, home ownership program, if you just Google or whatever your favorite search engine is, if you put in City of Kingston home ownership, the program webpage will pop up, and there's an application form there and the eligibility rules as well. So I think that's everything. I could take questions now if there's any burning questions before Nicola talks about the social housing program.
Sure.
Is there any urgent questions that came up from that?
I don't have a question, but I do have to go soon. I just wanted to thank you for sharing that about the programs available, but just to make sure sponsors really understand that in the first year that the newcomers the sponsor is responsible for the cost of housing. You can look into all the, what's available to help newcomers in year 13, but sponsors are not supposed to be accessing like any type of assisted housing services. In that first year, they're responsible for the full cost, but it's great to help the newcomer look at all their options that are available so they can prepare for month 13 and be able to move on to affordable housing. So I just wanted to remind, like, if anyone is sponsoring or expecting someone, that's something to remember, is you are responsible to pay for all their housing and housing needs for the first 12 months.
Yeah, one thing I'd add that just triggered for me is a lot of the times we have people interested in our program and we'll talk with them, and this year might not be the year, but maybe in 2 or 3 years, so that you can establish as a goal, knowing that this program exists. It's a good stepping stone to home ownership. So for people who say, oh, the bank won't finance me this year, I say, you know what, that's not the end of the world. Don't lose hope. The program's going to be here next year and the year after that, very likely. So establishing a goal potentially for something like this could be a way to leverage the program availability, while at the same time dealing with the realities of, hey, it might take a few years to get established.
Yeah, and it's good to start those conversations early with people that are in Kingston, the refugees, so that you can like start to make a plan like you're talking about. That's great.
John, can I have ask a question? Now you said if this is the principal residence for the person for 20 years, then at the end of the 20 years, it's a forgivable loan. What will happen if the person went for a job to Toronto for 3-4 years and then rented that house and then came back to Kingston afterwards? Would that make any issues for the city?
Yeah, it would. So the home has to continue to be your primary residence throughout the term of the agreement. So if you moved to Toronto and then rented this house, we'd be looking for, that would be a default of the loan agreement, and we'd be looking for a repayment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question. All right. Okay, maybe Nicola, you can talk about the
social housing program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So that's great. I'm glad Mimi clarified the 1-year commitment for the sponsorship housing part, because I wasn't clear on that myself. And Tarek had mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation as well about the 1-year rule, and I wasn't quite certain what that was, because to get on the socialized housing registry, the centralized wait list, one of the requirements is that you are a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident or a refugee. But I'm guessing that in your cases, because of the 1-year rule, you would likely have to wait until that 13th month for your newcomers as well to apply for the social housing program. So once that happens, basically there's an application form that needs to be filled out, and it's with that the household has to provide income. They don't have to provide the verification, they just have to state what income they are in receipt of, and as long as the size of that household is under the household income limits, then, and if they are a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, eligible to be on the wait list for rent geared to income, subsidized units. The income limit for a bachelor unit is $25,000 for the year. 1 bedroom is $31,000 for the year. 2 bedroom is $37,500 for the year. 3 bedroom is $40,500 for the year, and 4 bedroom is $50,000 for the year. And that's based on gross income, but So normally what's on the notice of assessment, I don't know if by the 13th month, if your newcomers will have been able to file their taxes yet or not.
Usually.
But basically the big mistakes that have come through is not having the application fully complete with the proof of citizenship or status in Canada and proof of identification for all members of the household. So the household is everybody who wants to live in the same unit. Doesn't have to be family, but the income of all people in that household is going to be taken into consideration and has to be under those limits that I spoke about based on occupancy standards. So basically, if you're single, you'd be eligible for a bachelor or one bedroom. If you are a spousal couple, you would be eligible for a one bedroom or bachelor. And then each additional person would be eligible for another bedroom. Let me just see here. It's very important too with the application. At the end of the application, there's a list of all the different subsidized units that are available, as well as there's also rent supplement units that aren't quite the same as subsidized units. Subsidized units are actual units that will cost a certain amount of money to stay there, whereas rent supplements is just in the regular market, and the landlord is paid a portion by the city, and then the tenant pays the rest. There's also what's called the portable housing benefit, which is City of Kingston and a few other municipalities have. And that is another option that you can choose on the application, whereby you're not applying for a certain unit, you're applying for a benefit where you would get a certain amount of money that you could use towards your rent. And that's normally paid directly to the landlord as well, but it makes it easier. You can move anywhere within the City of Kingston and the Township of Frontenac, and so that it's mobile with you. If you qualify for it and if you're accepted for it, even if you move, that benefit will move with you. So that's a really good choice to add to the listings, but it's very, very important that when somebody fills out an application, that they choose only the places that they would really be willing to live at, because once you are offered a unit, you only are allowed one refusal on it. And if you refuse it, you are no longer eligible on the wait list, and you would have to reapply. It used to be 3 refusals, but as of January 2020, that changed to 1. So that's why it's really, really, really important to make sure that the choices you have on the list are ones that you would actually say yes to. So those are important things. Mm-hmm. Also very important is once you have done your application and you've been told that you're eligible, it's really important to make sure that your worker is aware of any changes in your phone number, address, family composition, if you're adding somebody to the household or taking someone away. But mostly the contact information is really important, because there is a yearly annual review that is done, and which is basically just reaffirming who's in the household and what the income levels are, just to make sure that you're still eligible to be on the wait list for the rent geared to income units. If the worker can't get in contact with the person, or if that annual review isn't done, then that can make them ineligible as well. So it's very, very important to make sure that the worker is aware of any changes, and also to keep in mind that I got accepted to be on the wait list in September. I know I'm going to need to do a review in September, to keep that in your mind, to keep looking for the mail, to make sure that you open anything from the housing department. And if you haven't heard anything, to call your worker. So those are the two big things of staying on the list. In terms of the wait list in general, it's hard to say specifically how long it is to wait for a certain unit, because each provider, when you make your choices, that puts you on a wait list for that specific unit that you've decided on. And so that those different properties have different wait lists, and there might be more people that want to live at a certain place than another place, so that somebody might have been on the wait list for 2 years and get offered something before somebody who has been on for 6 years, because that wait list of the place they chose doesn't have as many people who are willing to move there. But approximate wait times are, for a bachelor and 1 bedroom right now, is approximately 5 to 8 years. And for 2 bedrooms, it's 2 to 5 years. For 3 and 4 bedrooms, it's 6 months to 3+ years, depending. And for seniors residences, it's 1 to 4 years. So the wait list is high regardless. And so the more choices you have on there, the more likely you're going to get something. But as I say, if you're really not going to say yes to one of the areas, then don't put that on your list, because when you refuse that, you're going to have to reapply again and start that wait all over again. I don't know if I have much more to say about that. Just take a look here. Yeah, I was going to talk about the Housing Help Center too, that John already put on the chat. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I have a question, Nicola. If somebody filled out the form for the housing, but another family member arrives, within the year, do they have to go back to the bottom of the list if they add one more room?
No, they just have to make sure they let their worker know. So once the application is submitted, so you fill out the application, make sure you have photocopies of all the permanent resident cards, and submit that. As soon as it arrives here, it gets date stamped, so that's the date that's going to be your chronological date for the list. And then they'll get reviewed, and then a letter will go out stating whether they're eligible or not, and for what size unit, as well as the worker's name. So any changes, they get in contact with that worker, and if they want to add someone, they would have to also include that person's income. So they would have to do another form to update the information, and probably update maybe the size of the unit. However, the date does not change.
Okay. I have a question. How does the wait list work with the portable benefit? How does the
that is a separate wait list on its own. So you have your wait lists for one address and another address, and it's broken down into north, south, east, and west. And then we have ones up in the Charlotte Lake area. But portable housing benefit is its own separate list. So you can be on any of the other ones as well as the portable housing unit. It's just when there's one to be offered, then the next person on that list can choose that. And then at that point in time, they would be taken off the wait list for the rent geared to income units and would just take the portable housing benefit.
And what would be the wait time for that one right now? Do you know?
Again, it's really hard to say. I honestly can't give you a good answer on that one. Mm-hmm. It could be a year to 2 years to 5 years, depending on how. Right now, it's probably slower because people aren't moving because of COVID, and also the occupancy, like the vacancy rate. So a lot of people aren't moving. So those who are already in the PHP program, unless they're going to be moving out of town or whatever, it's but it's another option. And I always say, like, put that on your list. It actually doesn't count as a refusal. Okay. So because it's not a rent geared to income unit, the legislation has stated any refusals for the portable housing benefit do not count towards that one refusal. So there's no harm in putting that on there. And then if your name comes up and you're offered a PHB and you're like, oh, they don't want to move anywhere, or they really want to wait for one of the subsidized units, then that doesn't affect them. Their name just gets taken off the portable housing benefit list. The other thing is they could choose to say, oh yes, I want it. And then they're given 90 days to try and find a place. Mm-hmm. And so they're not taken off the list. They're just kind of put on hold. And if it turns out that they can't find a place, then they would just get returned, or they haven't found anything they like and want to remain on the list, then their file just gets put back on with their original chronological date.
Can it be applied to the place that they're currently living in?
Yes.
Good. Any other questions for Nicola?
Is Frontenac housing a part of this social housing, or is it someplace that we apply separately?
It is what part of it, sorry?
Is Frontenac housing separate from this social housing ministry, like this department?
Frontenac housing?
Yes, off Van Order Drive. I live very, very close by, and I realize that they do have units, they have townhouses here and there that appear to be geared to income. Would that be run by the city of Kingston as part of your social housing program?
John, do you know?
Well, Ms. Clary is referring to Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation.
Oh, okay.
And asking what is its role within the whole network of social housing.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation is one of our providers. So there's 16 providers. So there are different property managers, and Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation is one of our largest, has over 90% of our units. So we as service managers fund their operating costs, but we at this department look after the wait list. But once someone gets to the head of the wait list of one of the Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation's addresses, it's them who will contact the next on the list and show them the unit and offer them the unit and calculate what rent they would have to pay and sign the lease with them. So we at the city fund those providers, and we at the city look after the registry and the wait list. But once someone is at the top of the list of one of the providers, it's then the provider that will put the offer out to the next person on the list and do all the lease and calculations. And at that point, once the tenant is housed, it's basically they're dealing with that property manager and that they'll be doing yearly reviews with them, having to show their notice of assessment every year to do their rent calculations. So at that point, it's not part of the city's responsibility. It's part of the property manager's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what I want to know is that if a person is familiar with one of the not property housing neighborhoods because they may have lived or they live close to it or they've heard about it through one of their contacts or one of their sponsors or a friend of a friend of a friend, and they say, well, I would like to live or to be able to apply to, do they have to go through the city of Kingston and make sure they choose that?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct, Anne.
Okay, so they would have to know on the application that you run exactly where these different neighborhoods, these different projects are located and what they actually are.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so that address would be included in
Yeah.
very large application. They have to make sure that while they apply that they do realize that which address it is, what name it appears under, and apply and check mark there.
Correct.
Okay, if they need to make a change to their application because they realize, well, a year ago or 6 months ago, I was not aware of the different neighborhoods or projects that are, and just kind of check mark a few places, but without really realizing what it meant and want to add to their list, could they make a change and add an address? Let's say the one at the, I'm giving an example, the one at the Bath Road and Portsmouth Avenue on the southwest corner, for example.
That's a great question, Anne. Yes.
They're not always aware when they fill out the application. That's one thing I have noticed, is that the family that is very new to the area,
yeah,
and depending with whom they fill out the application, if it's somebody that has owned a house all their lives and is not familiar with the rental market, is not familiar with the different neighborhoods or the different housing projects, but lives way out in the suburbs, they may need some encouragement in that they just don't know as they're filling out the form, like what are all these addresses, and you know.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And yes, changes can be made. There might be a couple of addresses on there that people have chosen, and then they drive by and say, oh no, I don't want to live here. So any additions or deletions of the choices, there is a form that can be filled out, and the person would just fill that out and get it to their caseworker, and they will make those changes. Nothing affects the date, but yeah, it's very important that if you do have a change in mind, I want to add something or take something off, to make sure your caseworker knows as soon as possible.
Okay, and that would be with the social housing department with the city of Kingston.
That's correct.
On Montreal Street.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I just want to add that we can help sponsors with that process. So we have lots of experience filling out those forms. So you're welcome to contact us when you have newcomers coming.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Nicola, I think Liz has a question over on chats. So how does a person find out where the different housing suppliers have units? Does an applicant have to work through a social worker? Sunny answer.
So the listing is on our website. If you go to the City of Kingston and search housing, and if you go to the application for rent geared to income assistance, Part A, this is what it looks like. And there's a whole section at the back that has all the different units and who the providers are. So that's that's right on our City of Kingston website under housing, and then social housing applications. So it's the application for rent geared to income assistance part A, and at the end of the application has all of the listings.
Is there a map provided in your listing to help to guide the newcomer as to whereabouts in the city it is located, if they're not able to get into a car and just tour the whole city over many, many days to visit all these different addresses? They would perhaps have an idea, well, it's in the north end, it's in the south end, it's in the east end, it's on the other side of the causeway.
There is, it is separated into city central, city north,
okay,
city west, and rural.
Okay.
But there's not enough, there's so many
Okay.
units. I think it would really kind of like, you know, be too much on a map,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it does say the different areas.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you would rely on sponsors or a settlement worker to kind of say, and you would work together to say which area you're thinking and kind of have that conversation. Would be
Yeah, you can also use Google Maps
Yeah.
To search these specific addresses and see it on your computer.
Thanks, Nicola. I do, before we want to run out of time, I want to bring in Osama to talk about another option. Then this could be part of a plan that you make with the refugees. And Osama has applied and successfully for a Habitat for Humanity home. Could you tell us how that worked for you?
Habitat for Humanity, affordable housing for the low-income families who doesn't, of course, you have to be in a steady job for at least 6 or 7 months, and child benefit is included. The income, your income is not supposed to be high that much, and not low. It is between the high and low. For myself, I applied for around 50,000 a year and was accepted in last year. They start to build the house in January. The requirements is not simple. It is job, steady job, child benefit. You have 2 applications. The first application, tell them how much your income is a year, how much is your child benefit, how much is your expenses a month, the rent, how much you pay rent now, how much if you have a vehicle, if you have everything about yourself. After you accept it for the first application, you go through another application or full application. The same information in the first application, but in a white way. After you accept it, you go to home visit to see how much you need the house. It's, of course, if the family size is big, like my family size is 7 people in 2 bedrooms, so I need a house. I need bigger house, of course. After that, when they found the land, I think the land is provided from the government. I'm not sure about that. When they found the land, they met you and told you that they will start building the house. It's a brand new house or townhouse. I got townhouses. They start to build, and there's one requirement is to do 500 volunteer hours or sweet equity hours with them. 250 with the family itself, and 250 the extended family, like friends, sponsorship, anyone who can help. You can't move to your new house until you did the 500 hours. The mortgage is for 20 years. There's no interest, no down payment. The mortgage a month or a year is dependent on the income. If your income is 50,000, they cut 2,500% of that income a year. So around, we calculate that around 1,000 a month, plus the electricity and gas and some. Yeah. But the main condition is that to be your income to be not that low, not that high. Because they consider that this is to help low income families. If your income is high, you can go to the bank and buy by yourself.
So are you putting your sweat equity into the home right now? Are you doing?
Yes.
Yeah. What kind of things are you doing?
First, before the COVID-19, I was helping in the house itself. Build the house, go carpenter. Sorry about my English.
No, it's good. You're doing great.
Construction works, something like that.
Yeah.
After COVID-19, they stopped. My house there's a cut time between March and October, around 4 months. They closed everything due to COVID-19. They resumed working, I think, last September. It's not allowed me to do volunteer hours in the house because the limit people working there. Now I'm doing in the store.
Okay.
Moving stuff. They got everything by donation.
Yeah.
People bring stuff to donate. We like tables or sofa or something like that. We clean that stuff and bring it to the store to sell it.
Great. So that counts towards your hours. Yeah.
Sorry?
That counts towards your 500 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said the home will be done next year?
Next December.
Next December.
Next December, yeah.
That's exciting.
It was almost 2 years since I applied.
Yeah. That's great. And what other options, like why did you decide to go with Habitat for Humanity? Was there?
At the end, it's your house.
Yeah.
You pay a mortgage, you save money. When I spoke with them about this, after let's say 5 years, I decide to move to another area. What I will do? They said you can sell us the house at the same price they give it to me, and you take your money back. So I like a saving. Instead of you paying in a rent housing, you pay 1,000 a month and it is gone. You save it in your house.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. We look forward to
Thank you.
hearing how that goes. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully more people can take advantage of that.
I think there's two more Syrian families applied and they accepted.
Great.
But I think the wait time to start build a new house for them will be long because of COVID-19, and they need more funds about that for the new houses. They now want to finish the houses in Cowdy Street. It is for me and for another family. After that, they don't know what will be happening. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks.
But their application is accepted and everything is okay.
Yeah.
Just about time.
Yeah. That's great. It's really it's encouraging. It's a great option for people too. Yeah. Thanks. We're almost out of time, but I want to just put out one last question. What advice anyone can add to this? What advice would you give to someone who's looking for affordable housing? Maybe they're a sponsor trying to find housing for their sponsored refugee, or maybe they're in their 13th month and they're looking for something else. So what advice could anyone offer to all of us here?
I can offer an advice. I think maybe the RAP team who works with government sponsors, refugee also do the same thing. I would advise people to put their name on the social housing registry as soon as they arrive. because, you know, by the time they get it, it will be over 12 months. So they will be, you know, the sponsors will not be affected by that at all. So just do it as soon as they arrive.
That's good. Good advice. Anyone else? Like your piece of advice? Yes, John.
I'd advise starting early and don't get discouraged. It's challenging, but it's like everything. It's a numbers game. The more listings you look at, you're going to be narrowing in over time. So start early, don't give up, and utilize some of the resources that are out there, such as the Housing Help Center and the listing they provide. That's a few bits of information I'd share.
Yeah, that's great.
I think for me, it's just managing expectations a lot. Even as a Canadian, when I came back to Canada and realized the prices of some of the apartments and the housing, it was a real shock. And I had lived here for most of my life. But once you get used to paying different prices in other parts of the world, and then you come back and realize what everything goes into and how even paying hydro and electricity is different than everywhere else, it all adds up. And so I think once you sort of break it down and say it's not just the rental price, it's also the price of the utilities, it's also your laundry, it's also all these other costs. I think managing those expectations and knowing that you will have to pay a large portion of your income than you had expected is important to know beforehand.
Okay. If I may also add something, Steve, because this is the kind of an incident happened with one of our clients, that when they went to the social housing at the time where they were assigned a unit to see, there was a genuine question from the caseworker, what's your income? And, you know, in Canada here, there is the gross income and the net income. So the person was just genuine saying, well, he was working at Uber at that time, that my income is $4,000 a month. And then the caseworker made the calculations, and based on that calculation, the rent was kind of high. So he refused the unit. And then when he went home and spoke with his friends and with others, they realized, no, you should not say 4,000 because still the expenses to be taken out from this 4,000. So I think for the case workers in general as an advice, and also of course for our clients, that differentiate between what's called the net income and the gross income.
That's good. Thank you. And yeah, Catherine?
Sorry, I just have an advice as well. I know I work mainly with government-sponsored families, so like an advice we pass to our families that will kind of make their month 13 easier. So whatever they rent in the first year, just to make sure this rent will be manageable in their second year. So sometimes if they're under a PSR agreement or GAR agreement, their allowance might be slightly higher, let's say, than what they will get from Ontario Works in month 13. So that will be month 13 sometimes is like a real challenge, the transition between what they were receiving the first year and then it's like quite difference in the second year. So the more affordable the rent during the first year, the easier this transition will be. But if they were renting, let's say, a townhouse because they were sponsored by like generous PSR groups and the year is over, then they will switch to OW and their allowance will be, let's say, 1,200. That will be like a big challenge how they would manage their monthly expenses. So sometimes us from the beginning will play a key role in their kind of making months 13 more easier to absorb. Yeah,
that's good.
Just wanted that.
So yeah, thank you, John Dunn. Maybe do you have one last word for us all from the legal point of view?
This video conference has been all about housing, but in the course of speaking with immigrants, you'll learn about other legal problems they're experiencing. Maybe it's public benefits, maybe it's employment. And I encourage you to contact me about those. We don't provide legal services in criminal or family law, but what we do know is who does provide services to complement what we provide at the legal clinic. And we like to meet immigrants because they tend to be high need in terms of legal services. So I encourage you to reach out to us if the folks you're helping are encountering problems.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I want to thank everyone that joined today. We're out of time, but we have one last comment.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. So based on what we learned from our last session, we think the future session on mental health will be really good. So on November 30th, we will hold one at 2 p.m. That's a Monday. And Steve is actually looking into a specific training that he can get set up with us and another organization in Toronto. So we'll have more word on that soon.
Mm-hmm.
Also, last time, if you were here, because these sessions were originally planned to be in person and we received funding to run these groups in person, we actually have some food money that we have not spent. So what we're gonna do is send out gift cards. So if you attended last session, you know we supported a local newcomer business that recently started a restaurant or a catering business. This week or this session, we're going to give out gift cards for 1,000 curry. Woo-hoo. I know, which is really good. So either you could pick it up from our office or we can mail it to you, but we'll be in contact with more information on how to get that set up. Cool.
Yes, John.
One last remark. If you're going to be considering other sorts of sessions, one that I encourage you to consider is employment. And of course, all that I'd be able to contribute are some advice and remarks about employment law issues affecting immigrants. Of course, there are other issues, but in my experience, when Gayatri arranges for me to speak to newcomers to Canada, employment law is one where they really, really can.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to keep in mind.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. It was really good information shared today. And we can keep connecting with each other and networking. There was lots of good links and things shared. Mm-hmm. And if you want to share your email, you want to put that out there for people to be able to contact you, please do that in the chat box. But we're thankful so much for you guys coming. All right. So take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks for organizing.
Yeah, thanks, John.